I want to start with a quote by David Livingstone. Lord, lead me anywhere. Just go with me. Lay any burden on me. Just sustain me. Sever any tie in my heart except the tie that binds my heart to yours. This is a world of average, and average is acceptable. The problem with average is you're as close to the bottom as you are to the top. And we accept average in our attitudes, we accept average in our schools, we accept average in business, we accept average in customer service. In fact, we are so diluted in what it means to be leaders and what it means to be successful. We are so diluted that we think average is okay, rather than challenging average and pushing to say that's not good enough. We never rise above mediocrity by just doing the same thing we've always been doing. Jay Strack said that the crack in the Liberty Bell represents the problem of our nation, of sin, that there are cracks everywhere in our society. And there is so much at stake that we must address it as leaders in our homes, in our churches, in our school, in our community. There's no clarion call to honor and to duty. Once you start breaking down the walls and lose the tenacity to say what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong, doesn't matter what anybody's opinion is about it. We didn't set the rules, God set the rules. God created marriage. He decided what marriage would look like. And once we lose our tenacity on that subject, and we're losing it more and more and more in the evangelical church, once we lose that, then we can't complain about all the godless things that begin to come in to our culture. Edmund Burke said, all it takes for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing. Ronnie Floyd, who's president of Southern Baptist Convention, said, do we really think there is any other answer at this time in our world than spiritual awakening in our nation and the world for Christ? This is why we must pray. And I mean pray like never before. We need to pray personally in churches and in gatherings with other Christ followers. And then this is what he said after he made that statement. He said, that means it starts with me personally. It continues with my church collectively. It influences my region miraculously. It awakens the nation supernaturally, and it impacts the world globally. So one of the places we have to be tenacious is in prayer. We've already talked about how Nehemiah was a man of prayer. Our nation needs tenacious leaders. The lowest number I can find is for ages 12 to 29, 88% of people ages 12 to 29 do not attend a church of any kind in America today. 88% do not. We are already a lost and pagan nation. Between the 85 and 88% of those who do attend, they stop attending once they leave home, 88% of them, which means only 12% of the original 12%. That's 1.4%. 1.4% of children that are raised in churches are today staying in the church and staying in the faith and staying committed to Christ. 1.4% are what sociologists would call a Christian, no matter whether they're evangelical or mainstream or whatever. So we've got a crisis. We have a nation that needs tenacious leaders, and we're not going to raise up tenacious leaders that have no moral fiber, backbone, or understanding. Our families need tenacious leaders. Anybody ever heard the statement, as home goes, so goes the church? Every 27 seconds in America, the divorce gavel sounds on a marriage. Every 27 seconds, a marriage ends in America. That's frightening. Every year, 2 million children are abused and beaten in their homes. It's time for leaders to rise up and say, That's not acceptable. Our schools need tenacious leaders. Let me give you 5 things. I could list a lot more, but let me just give you 5 quickly. Why do our schools need tenacious leaders? Because of evolution. Now, there was a commentary written that was pulled. The old Broadman commentary refuted the first 11 chapters of Genesis. And there is much debate in the scientific and culture and other cultures about whether the first 11 chapters of Genesis matter or not. If there was creation or if there wasn't creation, and did man evolve from an ape? Did he come out of pond scum? Well, I've got relatives that came out of pond scum, but that's a totally different story. Here's the deal. If you take out the first 11 chapters of Genesis, you take out the first reference to the cross in Genesis chapter 13, you take out a blood covering for Adam and Eve, and you remove the necessity of God dying for sin if you take out the first 11 chapters. It's a serious deal. And it is a theory. It is not a fact. As long as we can find anybody that's ever lived, that ever knew how to write anything, nobody has ever written, I just saw a frog become something else. You didn't wake up one day and go out in your backyard and your Labrador Retriever was suddenly a 3rd grader. And they say, well, it takes millions and billions and billions of years. Well, that's their opinion. They have a right to be wrong. Number 2, revisionist history. Revisionist history. We are rewriting the history books of America. We ignore facts. And can I just tell you, facts are facts, whether they're good or bad. Facts are facts. We cannot ignore facts. And we can't ignore facts that we want to ignore and then harp on facts that we don't want to ignore. Revisionist history changes a culture to where we don't really know who we are and what we were about. How many of you went through school and you'd go through American history and you'd always get stopped? I mean, you never got to like World War II, or you might not even gotten to World War I. I mean, you spent all this time, and then all of a sudden in the last week, now here's what's happened in the last 125 years. And you get all that stuff, and you don't know why we do what we do. You don't know what we do. And one of the most important things I think we do is to remind people of our history. We got people that don't know our states, they don't know our capitals, they don't know, and I know I'm just getting on really on a soapbox on this right here. But when I asked a girl one time, and she said something about Baton Rouge, she said, now what state is that in? I said, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. You're in Baton Rouge, Louisiana right now. There's a sign at the state line that said, welcome to Louisiana. And you're there. Oh. Revisionist history, safe sex epidemic. There are 39 sexually transmitted diseases today, and 11 of them have no cure. No cure. Safe sex epidemic. Tolerance. Now here's the problem with tolerance is we've got people using the same word we use. When we say tolerance, they just have a different dictionary. Truth is still truth. Right is still right, and wrong is still wrong. And tolerance does not need to be interpreted as a diluting of truth. Last one I would say is bullying. Bullying. We're allowing way too much bullying in our schools. You know, when I was in school, I got sent to the principal's office for chewing gum. Now they check you for guns. And somehow we in America, under our watch, our leadership, our elected officials, feel like that's okay. And it went down. And you can argue this if you want to, you can be wrong. But it didn't help us when we took prayer and the Bible out of school. Now, I want to give you an example of a guy who I think is a great example of a tenacious leader. His name is Bob Weiland, W-I-E-L-A-N-D. He's known as Mr. Inspiration. He was a three-sport athlete in high school. He went to Vietnam in 1969, stepped on an 82-millimeter mortar round and lost both of his legs. He was pronounced dead on arrival in the hospital. People magazine called him one of the 6 most amazing Americans of the past 20 years. Bob has walked across America on 2 artificial legs. 3 years, 8 months, and 6 days. He started on September the 8th, 1982. He finished on May 14th, 1986. He walked 2,784.1 miles, 4,900,016 steps. At the end of it, they asked Bob, what was the hardest part? He said, the first step. The hardest part of tenacity is the first step. If we don't take the first step, we won't take the other steps. And so let me give you some principles from Bob Weiland. Number 1, I love this one. Lead, follow, or be roadkill. Lead, follow, or be roadkill. This is not in your notes. You're just going to find a place to write it down. Number 2, accept challenges or never have a victory. Accept challenges or never have a victory. You got to lead, follow, or be roadkill. Accept challenges or never have a victory. This is a great one. Be humble before you stumble. That's a good principle. Be humble before you stumble. Success is never based on where you start, but where you finish. It's not about where you start, it's about where you finish. And his last one is do the right thing for the right reason. Now let's talk about the lies. They're there in your notes. They're lies perpetrated on our nation, our family, our schools, and our churches. And let me just give you these. You can think about them and stew on them for a while later on. Number 1, that the battle isn't real. We stick our heads in the sand. We pull the covers over our head. We just pretend the battle isn't real. That somehow some politician or some preacher has gotten us worked up about something that's not really an issue at all. It is an issue. Number 2, that life began with blind chance. Not according to Jeremiah chapter 1. Not according to the birth of Jesus. Not according to the birth of John the Baptist. Not according to the statements in the Bible about the fullness of time. That life began with blind chance. Number 3, that we can have morality without religion. That is a lie. We can have morality without religion. You know what that means? That means that sometimes you're going to be in conversations at your business, in your home, at your school, in the community, at lunch, and somebody's going to say, well, we just need to have more morals. Well, what we need is Christ. No, we don't need Christ. We just need more morals. No, you can't have morality without religion. You have to have a basis on which to build morality. Otherwise, every man does what's right in his own eyes, and there's no king in Israel. Number 4, whatever is legal is moral. Can I tell you that sometimes in America the majority is wrong? That whatever is legal is moral. We're now in a stage in our country where we're legislating immorality, not morality. Number 5, morality cannot be legislated. What do you think the 10 Commandments are? 10 Commandments are there to tell us these are the laws. This is what it means to break a law. Morality cannot be legislated. When you can't legislate it, when you can't put up standards and barriers, then why have stop signs? Why have stop lights? Why have slow? Why have slow down on the curb? They're trying to tell me what to do. No, they're trying to save your life. That's why they're there. Number 6, a fetus is not a human. A fetus is not a human. I posted on our Facebook page a couple of days ago from Matt Chandler, 8-minute thing that he did on what a 20-week-old baby in the womb feels, and it's pretty amazing. I mean, you ought to watch it. Number 7, pornography is a harmless adult pleasure. Pornography is a harmless adult pleasure. And number 8, the church should have no voice in government. By the way, that's exactly what Hitler did. If you've read Andy Andrews' book, How to Kill 11 Million People, he called the leaders of the church in after he had gotten control of the government in Germany. And he called the leaders of the church in and said, you can say whatever you want to say inside your churches, but you cannot say what you say in your churches outside your church. You can keep your gospel inside. Why? Because that's the mentality of a maniac dictator who says the church should have no voice in government. And this whole lie of separation of church and state should not be what it has become, and that is the separation of church from state. The church needs to be the moral conscience of the nation, and it should be the salt and light in a nation, and we need to be involved in government. We have cowards in every office in America. State, local, federal, they're cowards because they will not do what's right and they don't want to hear from us. Why? Because we'll tell them they're wrong. And what they need is they need a prophet who has the tenacity to stand up and say, this is wrong and this needs to be fixed. But we're told the church doesn't belong in government anymore. All right, observations on persistence. These are going to go quick. We must reject the lifestyle of giving up easily. We can't give up easily. We got to stay at it. I know it gets tough. I know it gets frustrating. I know you get tired of it, but we can't give up easily. Number 2, we must change our view of what success looks like. Success doesn't always look like what the world says it looks like. Success for me is just being faithful to what God's told us to do. Number 3, we must eliminate negative thinking. We got to eliminate negative thinking. Number 4, we must eliminate our fear of failure. Well, what if we don't succeed? The better question there is, what if we don't try? What if we don't try? We must eliminate our fear of failure. We must find a purpose worth fighting for. We must eliminate excuses. We must accept responsibility. It happened on our watch. It happened while we were all in charge. We must ask God for stamina. We must give people reasons to believe. And we must never let the problems block our view of God's promises. Now, in Nehemiah chapter 4, in verse 6, you see in Nehemiah chapter 3, he delegates to all these different people. He delegates their responsibility, the division of labor. He's got all kinds of people, all kinds of tasks, a division of labor. By the way, Nehemiah's name never appears in chapter 3. Never shows up one time. He's honoring the people who are there doing the work. Nehemiah 4 and verse 6, so we built the wall, and the whole wall was joined together to half its height, for the people had a mind to work. Now just turn back to Nehemiah chapter 2. Let's look at where we've come to. Nehemiah chapter 2 and verse 17, let us arise and build the wall of Jerusalem. Let us, not let me, not let you, let us. Verse 18, let us arise and build. And in chapter 3, he identifies the us. And he organizes the work around the 7 gates of the city, moving counterclockwise. So he's got this work all organized, and that's what we're going to talk about here in just a minute, about how you organize the work. He divided the people up into workforces. Here's what he did. First of all, he worked within the existing structure. What was the existing structure? He worked within the family. He had people working in front of their homes. Because the one thing we can get tenacious about is defending our homes. And so he had people working in front of their homes. He worked in the existing structure. Secondly, he enlisted the available workforce. He enlisted the available workforce. And so when you look at chapter 3, there are religious leaders, civic leaders, priests, Levites, temple servants, goldsmiths, merchants, officials, men and women. And verse 5, there's this group that sat it out, but there's always a group that's going to sit it out. But he found the available workforce. Number 3, he kept them focused. Chapter 3 and verse 1, they consecrated it. What we're doing is for the Lord. They consecrated the work. Chapter 3 and verse 20, they zealously repaired another section, which that word zealously means they were glowing hot. They were on fire. They were blazing forth. 1 Corinthians 15:58. Therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that your toil is not in vain in the Lord. He kept them focused. By the way, do you know what the word enthusiasm means? The Greek word means God-possessed. The Greek word for enthusiasm means God-possessed. They were possessed. I mean, they were controlled. They were focused. He was strategic. Remember, he placed them in families in their existing structure. He put them in place for a reason. And if you read chapter 3, this is for you to do later on, you'll see that he uses these phrases next to him and next to him and next to him and after him and after him. And it was the Lord's work, chapter 4 and verse 15. Then all of us returned to the wall, each one to his work. I love this quote by, I think he's still the senior vice president of operations for Chick-fil-A. But Tim said this, you don't try to prioritize your schedule, you schedule your priorities. I mean, you don't take your, I'm going to prioritize my schedule. No, you schedule your priorities. You decide what you're going to do with the time that you've been given. All of us have a 24-hour day. I remember saying to a guy, when we were at Roswell Street, we did a time management session with our staff. We had to keep track for 2 weeks of our time every 15 minutes for 2 weeks. By the way, this is an incredible task. Kept a sheet of paper, 15 minutes for 2 weeks, every 15 minutes from the time we were awake to the time we went to bed. And then we had to discover where we had wasted time in those 15-minute intervals. I think the average among us was that we had all wasted at least 12 to 14 hours a week. And that was a good one. That was one of the better ones. We'd all wasted 12, 14 hours a week. And I blurted out to this time management guy, and I said, you know, I just need more hours in a day. And he looked at me and he said, son, what you just said is God wasn't smart enough when he ordained 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 24 hours in a day, that God didn't know how to organize time and that you just need him to change his order so you can get it done. And I thought, I didn't really say that. Okay, the guy that made the dumb statement raised his hand. It wasn't me. All right. Some of what we're going to do tonight came from two particular John Maxwell lessons that he did back in the 1990s that still resonate with me today. One was called Teamwork Makes the Dream Work, and let me just give you his points on this. First of all, what does it take to organize a ministry or a task? Simplification. Simplification. Don't complicate it. I mean, you know, you get these manuals when you buy a car, you know, and they got this manual and all this stuff that you're supposed to do, and really all you're trying to figure out is where does the key go? Simplification. I just want to drive it. Where does the key go? Simplification. Verse 1, verse 3, and verse 12. The strongest organizations are the simplest ones. Let me give you a great illustration of this. your grandparents' farm. Every child had chores, right? Every child had chores. You had a job to do. My dad's job when he was growing up, every morning, didn't matter how cold it was, every morning he was to go out and get the wood and start the fire. And he was to get the house warmed up before everybody else got up. That was his job. His sister had another job. His other two brothers had other jobs. They all had tasks and jobs to do. It simplified the work. And used to be on a farm, you knew what you did. You went out on a farm and you did what you're supposed to do. You plowed, you got the eggs. When I stayed with my grandparents, get up, go get the eggs. So they had to show me which eggs to get and which eggs not, which hen to mess with and which hen not to mess with, and the difference between a hen and a rooster. They had to show me. But I learned how to go out and get the eggs. My grandfather taught me how to milk a cow by hand. No machine. He taught me by hand. Now, son, this is what we're going to do today. You're staying here. And I'm thinking, I wanted to come see my grandparents and be lazy. And my granddaddy's got me out here. And then he had me one day putting dynamite in a hole to kill a fox den. It was getting in his chicken house. And I'm thinking, I'm 9 years old. Stick of dynamite. How long can I run before I get away from this? He simplified it, light it, and run. I got that. I'm on it. I know exactly what I'm supposed to do. You simplify it. Number 2, participation. In chapter 3, Nehemiah names 38 people and 42 groups. Participation. R.K. Strackman says the expansion of any movement is in direct proportion to its success in mobilizing its total membership in continuous propagation of its beliefs. Verse 5, the nobles of Tekoa did not support the work of their masters, but they got mostly all the people bought in. Number 3, delegation. He delegated, he divided the labor, he put people into workforces. Number 4 is motivation. 5 times you see the phrase, by his own house. He motivated them. Build a wall, it's going to protect your home. Number 5, cooperation. 20 times you see that phrase, which we talked about before, next to him and next to them, literally at his hand. That little phrase next to him means that they were close enough to reach and touch the other person. They were working side by side, shoulder to shoulder, arm in arm. 6 times in Nehemiah 3, you see the word build. 35 times you see the word repair. There was cooperation. There was motivation. There was cooperation. While I was studying for this, I found this story of these 2 guys trying to move a refrigerator. And they're struggling, and they're going back and forth, and they're working on this thing. And finally, one of them says, hey, time out. Let's take a break here for a minute. And the first guy says, I don't know if we're ever going to get this refrigerator in this house. And the other guy said, in it? I thought we were trying to get it out of it. Make sure you got cooperation. Number 6, administration. Verses 17 and 18. There were clear lines of authority. Administration. Listen, hard work never killed anybody. What kills us is when we're working hard at the wrong things. That's what stresses us. That's what kills us, when we don't know how to work or what to work on. Now, this next one, for those of you in business and for those of you who have people that are under you, and for those of you that have kids and you're trying to figure out how to assign chores and tasks to them or whatever, this next one's as good as anything I've ever run across. How to put people in their place. Now, that could go in a lot of different directions. Quite honestly, I could think about a few, but the sign of an outstanding leader is the proper placement of people. We've all heard that illustration. Get the right people on the bus. But it's not just the right people on the bus, it's the right people on the bus in the right seats on the bus. But you got the right people in proper placement. Now, why do leaders place people in the wrong places? And these are common mistakes, and the tenacious leader will work until he gets this right. Number one, a failure to know the requirements to make the job successful. We don't know the requirements. We put square pegs in round holes. I mean, you don't want the hostess at a restaurant to be an introvert. You want the hostess at the restaurant to be an extrovert. You don't want the wrong people in the wrong places. I'll tell you a great story here. When Flywheel came out, a guy in Florida he was a car dealer in Florida, had about 5 dealerships, and he went to get a movie, and he couldn't find the one he wanted, but he saw the Flywheel movie sitting there in a video store in Panama City. And so he said, it's a car movie. Okay, I'll take it home and watch it. And he watched it, and immediately he got under conviction about some of his business practices. He said, and later in communicating with us, he said, I wasn't breaking the law, but I was bumping the edges a little bit. And he said, I watched it, and I called all my workforce in the next day and said, this is the way we're going to do business. This is how we're going to do things. And he said, then I took the video and I gave it to one of my salesmen. He said, I should have fired the guy a dozen times. He was absolutely the worst car salesman that has ever walked the face of the earth. He said, this guy was so bad that somebody could walk in with a wad of cash and say, give me a car, any car, I don't care, here's the money, I just want a car, and he'd talk him out of buying it. And so he said, I gave the video to the guy and said, you need this. And the guy took it home and he watched it. The next morning at 6 o'clock in the morning, that car salesman's wife heard him in the shower weeping and sobbing and crying out to God. And all he knew to say to God was, God, I need what that man in the movie got. And he prayed the simple prayer that was prayed in Flywheel. It was a Saturday morning. The lot was open until 1 o'clock. It was pouring down rain. Pouring down rain. This guy showed up for work like he always had, but he's a new man. He's a saved man. He's a new man. And he sold 6 cars in 6 hours in a downpour. He just needed a change in his life. You got to know the requirements to make the job successful. Number 2, a failure to place people where they need to be. A failure to place people where they need to be. A failure is most often the result of a lack of patience and preparation. A lack of patience and preparation. Now, let me just stop here and give a quick illustration. When I was on staff at Roswell Street for 4 years, I was the longest tenured youth minister at Roswell Street until the guy that followed me. Most of them had not lasted a year and a half, and I was there for 4 years and had a great experience there, and I loved it. But we had 4 ministers of education in 4 years. I said to the pastor one day when we were going to lunch, and I could tell all the staff was drifting back from me because, the pastor and I had a good relationship, and I'd just kind of tell him what I thought, and he put up with me. And so after we'd lost our 4th one in less than 4 years, I said to the pastor, I said, Pastor, we ought to just put a revolving door on that minister of education office since we run through them so quickly. And I could see staff members just falling back, waiting for Nelson to go after me. And he put his arm around me and he said, that's funny. But here's what I learned. I learned that on our staff, and we had a good staff at that time, as fine a staff as I ever served with when I was a staff member. But here's what I learned. Every time we lost a staff member, this is what the staff would do when we would go to the staff meeting on Monday. When we go to the staff meeting on Monday, and now we got all these areas of responsibility that somebody's got to pick up, this is what the staff would do. They'd hide, hoping that Nelson wouldn't ask them to pick up any more responsibilities because they didn't want to work any harder. Here's what my dad taught me. If there's a need, you volunteer, and you do it right. And so the pastor said one day, I need somebody to put together the church mail out. I said, I'll do it. I didn't know anything about putting together a church mail out, but I did it. He said, I need somebody to run the adult Sunday school. I said, I'll do it. And so I volunteered for about 3 things. I did the same thing was I was on staff at Spartanburg. We lost a minister of education. I ran a Sunday school campaign, having never run a Sunday school campaign in my life, and we set record attendance all 5 weeks. And the pastor tried to talk me into becoming the minister of education. But I volunteered, and it meant I had to work harder. I had to work smarter. He would throw things on me. I'm telling you, he would come into my office with an idea and say, dear brother, I think we ought to do this event. And I'm thinking, there's no way I'm going to pull that off. And I can remember nights being at that church to 12 and 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning with some interns and some volunteers, stuffing envelopes for a thing that did not work. But every time I picked up something, I would go to my box and there would be a bonus check in my box. And I learned. And I didn't tell anybody else on the staff that I got a bonus check. I figure if you dummies don't want to do any work, I'll take the extra money and run. I mean, we were paying 13% interest on a house payment at that point. I'd have taken anything. I was thinking about selling my firstborn child for a while there, but... All right, what happens when we place people in the wrong places? Here's the point of that. Don't run from work, and don't run from opportunities. You may find that you're good at something because you get your first chance to do it. You may find you know how to do something you didn't know you knew how to do, or you're going to learn something that's going to make you a better person overall. All right, what happens when people are in the wrong place? Low morale. You get low morale. You get an unwillingness to work together. People just don't want to work together because they don't fit. It's not a team. There's an erosion of confidence. An erosion of confidence. Progress is hindered. And here's the worst part. Potential is never realized. Potential is never realized. You want to make sure you got the right people in the right places. All right, let's just look at this little sentence thing with a one-word answer to it. The wrong person in the wrong place equals regression. The wrong person in the right place equals frustration. The right person in the wrong place equals confusion. But the right person in the right place equals progression and multiplication. You get a lot more done. So how do you put people in the right place? If you're leading a team, even if it's a study group or whatever it is, if you're leading a team of people, if you're trying to get your work organized and be more productive and more fruitful with your life, how do you put the right people in the right place? First of all, you know the team. You have to know the team. You can't be separated from the personalities, the gifts, the abilities, the talents, the strengths, the weaknesses of your team. And you have to know the team well enough to know what they're good at and to know what they're not good at. Also, by knowing the team, I think you also have to know what you're good at and what you're not good at. Because nobody is good at everything. That's why you need a team. Because you don't know everything, I don't know everything, and we're not all good at everything, so we need people around us, and we need to know the ones that have the emotional stability to be stretched. Don't throw something on somebody that's going through a difficult time in their marriage or their family. It could be what takes them over the edge. So you got to know the team. You got to know how to give people time. You got to give people a sense of security. Hey, we're all going through stuff. Everybody in this room is going through stuff. And they need to know, and you need to know, and I need to know that this is a safe haven for people that are hurting and people going through stuff. They need to feel secure. And if they feel secure, I promise you, when they come out of that valley, they'll be on your team. But if you throw them under the bus, they won't be. They'll be on your team if you just give them time to get through the valley. All right, let's go back to number 7 now. Perspiration. Just going to take some hard work. Anything worth doing requires hard work. Ecclesiastes 9:10, whatever your hand finds to do it, do with all your might. Paul said, I worked harder than all of them in 1 Corinthians 15:10. Jesus warned us that the night is coming when no man can work, John 9:4. Here's the thing that I love about Nehemiah. Work came before his personal comfort. He did what God called him to do before he worried about if he was comfortable or not. Number 8, appreciation. I love the fact that Nehemiah names these people, that he points out the names and the groups of people who helped to get the work done. You see some verses there from Proverbs about when good people run things, everyone is glad, but when a ruler is bad, everyone groans. The leadership challenge says a vision is a mental picture of what tomorrow will look like. It expresses our highest standards and values. It sets us apart and makes us feel special. It spans years of time and keeps us focused on the future. And if it's to be attractive to more than an insignificant few, it must appeal to all of those who have a stake in it. It's got to appeal to all of those who have a stake in it. One of the reasons why we do the Meet the Need on Sunday mornings once a year is we all have a stake in this. And to appeal to just a few is not enough. All of us have a stake in what happens here. So let me go back before we hit these last little fill-ins, and the praise team may want to come up, which lets you know we're close to finish. It's not just about getting the right people on the bus. It's about getting the right people in the right seats on the right bus. There's a seat that you sit in. There's a seat that you have as a dad, as a mom, as a husband, as a wife, as a business owner, as a leader, as a teacher. There's a seat that you sit in. And you need to do the right thing while you're in that seat, because nobody else is supposed to be in your seat but you. You're supposed to be in that seat. And you have to take ownership of it, even when it's hard, and even when it hurts, and even when people don't understand. You have to take ownership of the seat that God has given you to sit in. And so let me give you what happens when we're in the right seat, and then we're going to sing our way out. When we're in the right seat, we tackle the problems head on. We tackle the problems head on. We encourage people to grow, because when they know that we're in the right seat, they feel better about the seat they're in. We fulfill our purpose. We turn potential into reality. We secure victories that others only dream about. We raise up leaders, and we win the day against our critics, the world, the flesh, and the devil. Harriet Beecher Stowe said, when you get into a tight place and everything goes against you till it seems as though you could not hang on a minute longer, never give up then, for that is just the place and the time that the tide will turn.